Great. Well, first off, I really want to thank you, Jake, and Quorum for having me and inviting me to join you all. It really is a pleasure to be here today. So before I kind of get into the census, I do want to kind of reiterate what Jake said, that Philly Counts is not the Census Bureau. We are an office put together by Mayor Kenny to support the Census Bureau in ensuring a complete and accurate count of Philadelphia. So, we're not in charge of the hiring process or even really conducting the count. We're just here to spread awareness and get out the word about the census. So with that, why is the census important? Why should we do it? The census determines our representation in Congress. Pennsylvania actually stands to gain or lose a seat depending on census data this year. So just really important that, we hang on to the representation that we have, and if we're able to gain some, that'd be great to have our voices really represented. Second, these are the big two reasons. Second, federal funding is determined by census data. The count of the census determines how much federal funding Philadelphia receives from, the national level, from the state level, all the way down to the local level. And that funding goes to schools, it goes to housing, it goes to healthcare, it goes to transportation, really a lot of public programs and services that we use every day can be benefited by the census and also impacted if there were to be an undercount. Lastly, census data is always used for research and to analyze and predict trends. So that's kind of going along with business, local businesses use census data to see how and where or to put in more factories, more businesses. This creates jobs for our communities. Also, when you think about if any of you have used Ancestry.com or wanted to see more about your family history, that data comes from census counts in the past. So, it's beneficial for people to know how many people are here, the demographic backgrounds, that all comes from the census. So how do you respond? How do you participate? For the first time in history, you can respond online to the census. However, we know that can be super convenient for some folks. We also know that it can also be a barrier for others. So that's not the only way that you can participate. You can also use the phone. You can complete the census over the phone, or you can simply, fill out the paper form that's mailed to your household and just mail it back to the Census Bureau. So the census is 9 questions. We like to say it's about a minute or so per question, so it could take about 10 minutes. That also depends how many people you're filling it out for. For the household, it could take a little bit longer. It could take shorter as well. Also, really, really important to know and to get out the word about is that there's no citizenship question on the census form. There was a lot of news coverage around the possibility of such a question regarding citizenship status, not so much news about the outcome, and that the Supreme Court actually ruled it unconstitutional to have a question regarding citizenship on the census because it would affect and impact the accuracy and also, the full count of the census of our population. Also, the census data collected is absolutely secure, confidential, and legally protected by the Constitution. Title 13, that requires us to participate in the census, also requires that it remains anonymous and confidential. So, we know that our data is not being shared with anyone. It's not, no one has access to it, not government agencies, no federal court or government agency can use that data against you. Also, no law enforcement agency, not ICE, FBI, CIA, police department, landlords, PHA, anyone, no one has access to this data. And it's actually locked down and confidential for 72 years. After 72 years, it does become public records, and that's when you can access it in the libraries to search up your ancestral history, or that's when that's when it becomes public. But 72 years is a pretty long time, so it's pretty safe to say that it's locked down for a great amount of time. Also, we get a lot of questions about kind of group living situations such as college dorms, nursing homes, correctional facilities. How do they get counted? So the Census Bureau has identified these group living quarters as group quarters. And that count began a little bit before the kind of official count of the regular population. And they reach out to the administrators directly and kind of do it on an individual basis. College students should be counted at their college address. That has been a really big challenge for us due to the situation we're living in now. A lot of college students have left their schools, left their school housing, and moved back with parents, moved with friends, moved elsewhere during this time. And it's super important to get out the message that even though they've moved or relocated for this time, they should still be filling out the census for their college address, because you think about all the colleges and universities that we have in Philadelphia, and those students are using our resources, they're using our transportation, they're using those public services that we need to get the accurate funding for to support them and support our residents. Also, following a similar logic, people who are incarcerated, they should be counted, or they will be counted at the facility where they are being held during this time on April 1st. So that was officially Census Day. So, just following a similar logic, if they were there on April 1st, they were counted there and not home. Trying to think. So kind of talking about the timeline of all of the count. It originally, the count was set to end by basically wrap up by the end of the summer. However, the Census Bureau has extended that timeline due to kind of the guidelines and restrictions of COVID-19. Again, ensuring the safety of its employees and also the American public as well, because the enumeration, when Census Bureau employees start to go out to households, that for obvious reasons cannot be happening right now. So that will start back up around, I think, midsummer around. And the count, actually, the Census Bureau is seeking statutory relief from Congress and from the President of the United States to extend this timeline. So it's not officially set in stone, but the count, depending on this timeline, will wrap up around October 31st. So, starting in June, the Census Bureau is hoping to have its offices at full capacity, and then, begin begin again the hiring process and getting people onboarded to then go out in the communities and follow up with those who have not yet responded. Which, brings me to another point, that a Census Bureau employee will only visit your home if you have not yet responded to the census. So while we think that, this timeline can cause some challenges, because it will inevitably interfere with the presidential primary, and information tends to get lost with that. It can also pose benefits that people have a little bit more time to complete their census, and while they are home during this time, it's more easy than ever to complete the census at home. You can do it, like I said, online, by the phone, or simply, responding by mail. So, I'm open to questions at this point. If there's anything that you think that I should be adding.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I actually had a couple questions myself. So you touched on how the census has scaled down considerably, because it's only 9 or 10 questions, is it right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I swear, I filled it out myself. And so what was that process like? Because it was such, a huge document before. How were they able to scale that down, and how does that, change census data collected? Is it still as accurate as before? Or?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I feel like that'd be a better question for the Census Bureau.
Sure.
It kind of goes back to like the history of it. But I know, I can think that they've at least been able to make it more concise and more direct. With the 9 questions, it's definitely, I'd honestly like to know myself if it's really helped with response rates, because, people used to get these long forms, and even 2 forms, one short form, one long form, and had to complete both. I necessarily don't really remember that, but I'm sure that it was time consuming. So I'm sure that 9 questions, 5-10 minutes is so much more simpler for people to complete it. So that's a good question, though. I would like to, try to get an answer for that, because I'd like to know too.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. And if not like just the time, time needed to fill it out, it probably just feels way more invasive, when you have pages upon pages, like asking the number of radios in your home, and
right.
All these things that, it's hard to predict, or, when you're just receiving this, you don't even understand why they're asking these questions necessarily.
Right.
And another thing you touched on was group living situations, and like particularly students. I don't know, because right now during COVID, you have a lot of people kind of shacking up together, specifically like romantic partners. If at the beginning of the stay-at-home order, I think there's a lot of people that decided, hey, I'm going to go to my boyfriend or girlfriend's place again and just wait this out together. Mm-hmm. So when people are filling that out, if they now have their girlfriend living with them, does that count as a resident that they would count as someone living there? I know is.
Yeah, that gets a little tricky, because I think we really always reference kind of the college students in that aspect, because even especially during this time, it is temporary. This situation that we're in, and also usually so the census does count, let's say, like long-term visitors, but that's months at a time. And if COVID-19 was not happening right now, then people that are, like you said, kind of grouping up in different homes, college students relocating, that wouldn't really be taking place, and they would probably be at the house or apartment that they would normally be living in. So I think it's just important for people to think about where they would be if this wasn't the case, and use their normal living address or where they spend most of their time.
Looks like we actually have a question from Steve. Thank you for the discussion. He said, is there any particular reason census records are held for 72 years prior to entering public domain?
Yeah, you know, that's another really good question that I actually haven't really gotten before. So I don't have a specific answer for that, why it's, 72 years. Personally, I think that's a kind of random number.
Yeah.
But I know, yeah, I don't have an answer for that, but I'll definitely look into it.
Cool. Yeah, I think maybe it could be as simple as anyone who could give you grief is long gone 72 years later. So maybe it's
yeah.
Cool. I did have one more question.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's quite timely that an online option for the census is out during this time. But how has it impacted your work personally? Do you think this will make it harder to get an accurate count, or do you think maybe the online option will just, kind of the gap there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So when my office kind of started working from home, we have, shifted to a virtual approach, just because, that's what's easy and what's convenient during this time. But we also know that a lot of residents of Philadelphia don't have access to internet, and they can't be going online to complete their census, let alone, go online to catch up with news, maybe. So that's why we've also focused a lot of our time to phone banking. So we, as a team, we go into the phone bank from 3 to 5 p.m. every day, and we call residents of Philadelphia just to check. We've included kind of check-ins with this too, so that it's almost like a trauma-informed call or approach. We want to be sensitive. We know a lot of people are having a challenging time with COVID-19. So, we call to check in, see how they're doing, see if we can help them with any resources or programs that the city has to offer, or, organizations have to offer during this time. But also reminding them about the 2020 census and, kind of linking the two, because in the end, once COVID-19 is all over, the census is going to be crucial to kind of that recovery process and making sure that something like this, at least to this extent, doesn't happen again. So we've been pivoting a lot to phone banking. We've also, we know that, a lot of young people find it more convenient to go online. So that has been, we've seen a big response online. However, a lot of people do still prefer to complete the paper form. And, we're encouraging folks that is still coming to households. They can wait for it, look out for it in the mail. And just encouraging that, it's the paper form is going to come, and they can certainly do that if they prefer that way.
Yeah, and it's something to do. We're all bored right now, right?
Yeah, seriously.
Cool. Actually, yeah, one more question. What was it? Oh, yeah. Is there a specific dollar amount associated with, a single citizen in terms of funding?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. So for every person not counted or not included in the count, it's a loss of $21,000 per person over 10 years. So you think about, a family of 5 that's not counted or not included in the count, that's like almost $100,000 that's just lost to our city, or at least that we don't get to serve our residents, to serve that community specifically, and make sure that they have the resources that they need to have, you know, a quality of life.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that demonstrates, you know, the value of everyone filling this out. So
Definitely.
it's a good point to leave us on.
Yeah.
So everyone